Hey guys, what's up? It's Atominator, and wow, that last video did even better than I thought it would. It hasn't even been 2 weeks yet, and we're already sitting at over 300,000 views. So thanks for watching, man. You guys rock. But to be honest, I wasn't entirely satisfied with that one, because it was originally supposed to be a top 10. But the thing is, I needed to head up north to help my dad out with some stuff at the cottage that weekend, so it was kind of rushed just to get it out the door, and some stuff had to be cut. So consider this the second half, or sequel, if you will. Technically, it's more like a prequel because while that one focused on the modern day mass monsters, this one harkens back to old school classic bodybuilding. And although these golden era physiques may not be as mind boggling as the ginormous freakazoids of today, they were nevertheless even more groundbreaking in terms of setting the standards for what was to come. So, once again, we're going to do this in chronological order. And first up, we got to talk about the myth Sergio Oliva. While it might be said that Dorian Yates was the first modern mass monster, Sergio Oliva Sr. was arguably the first modern bodybuilder, period. It's between him and Larry Scott, I'd say. They were the first two Mr. Olympias after all. No disrespect to Mr. Scott, who had some tremendous body parts like his biceps and forearms, but Sergio was just on another level. The dude was a genetic phenom and an intimidating force to be reckoned with. His first Olympia win in 1967 was so dominant, in fact, nobody even dared to challenge him in 1968, and he won his second title completely unopposed. Even good old Arnold himself got psyched out when he first saw the myth in person. At his Olympia debut in 1969, Arnold admits that Sergio had him mentally defeated right out of the gate, and for good reason. That tiny waist, the sweeping quadriceps, the flaring lats, and full massive triceps and forearms, Sergio was like a caricature back in the day. Nobody had ever managed to bring this combination of size, shape, and structure before. And honestly, when you factor in the proportions, with each of his thighs measuring larger than his friggin' waist, and a 20-inch differential between his chest and midsection, that's a distinction very few guys have ever been able to match. For the time, Oliva was simply in a league of his own, at least until a young ambitious Austrian came onto the scene. And this brings us to our second entry, which is, of course, the aforementioned Arnold Schwarzenegger. After he got over his initial awestruck reaction, Arnold went on to defeat Sergio the following year and continued to rattle off 6 straight victories at the Mr. Olympia, doubling the former record of 3 set by his predecessor. Where Sergio introduced newfound size and outrageous proportions, the taller Arnold brought even more size and took the conditioning to the next level. Unlike Sergio, who was often over-oiled and fairly smooth-looking, Arnold added an extra element of polish. He was one of the first to sport that famous Christmas tree feature in the lower back, as you can see here in 1974, which in my opinion was his best year. Arnold was near his largest here, but didn't lack for definition whatsoever. His massive chest was striated to the max, and as usual, he displayed sharp separation in his arms and quads. And it wasn't just the unprecedented conditioning, his posing was the other aspect of his added polish. Arnold really focused on his presentation and would practice his routines for hours each day, making sure to emphasize his strong points like his mountainous biceps and huge upper body, while downplaying his weaknesses like his wide waist, which is why he always tended to hit twisting shots to make his midsection appear even smaller than it really was. The Austrian oak even took ballet lessons with his buddy Franco in order to move more gracefully on stage. Talk about dedication. Okay, and now let's fast forward a bit. The year is 1981. Arnold's gone off to Hollywood and is out of the picture, so the throne is ripe for the taking. And even though Franco Colombo ended up clinching the title, the person I really want to focus on is the man who I believe should have rightfully won that year, Tom Platz. It's no secret that Platz was a true pioneer of leg development. He was indisputably the first bodybuilder to produce contest ready, tree trunk like thighs on stage. Platz's wheels would still be right at home on the Olympia stage today, almost 40 years later, especially when you consider the balance between the thighs and the calves, as well as overall muscular quality and detail. So even though he never won an Olympia, I think we can all agree that Platt's was definitely groundbreaking in terms of raising the bar when it came to lower body development. And if the Golden Eagle ushered in the age of bigger wheels, then perhaps we can thank another animal themed moniker, the Lion of Lebanon, for the quality back development we so often take for granted today. In 1983, Samir Banu displayed easily the best back to date. It was thick, detailed, tapered, and fully developed from top to bottom. This back double biceps could stand on stage today next to the Breon Ansleys or George Petersons, no problem. I think it's safe to say that Samir had one of the best back double biceps shots in history, bar none. He really did pave the way for the Dorians and the Ronnies and the Phil Heaths of the world. In fact, I've always found his rear lat spread to be somewhat similar to Phil's in that it's not the widest, maybe, but it makes up for it with detail and that shapely, rounded look. And finally, the obvious follow up to Samir when it comes to elite back development was none other than 8-time Mr. Olympia Lee Haney, who also happens to be the last entry for this video. Now that I think about it, and I don't believe I've ever heard anyone mention this before, so I'm going to say it here now. Haney was like the marriage of Banu and Schwarzenegger. I mean, he had the imposing size, the pleasing aesthetics, and impressive upper body mass of Arnold, plus an incredible world class back like Samir Banu. Another thing that Haney probably doesn't get enough credit for is his consistency. Before we ever saw Sean Ray or Dexter Jackson, Lee Haney was out there kicking ass and taking names on an absurdly consistent basis. Just go through the years of his reign. The guy never skipped a beat. He was always on, and as with the two guys I just mentioned, he looked more or less the same show to show year after year, just minor adjustments and improvements here or there, nothing too drastic. But like the old adage says, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And as number one in the world, Haney certainly didn't need to tamper with a winning formula. In fact, if you want to talk about overall quality in terms of satisfying all the bodybuilding ideals, from mass to conditioning to symmetry to posing and presentation, Lee pretty much had it all. And as far as representing the sport successfully as a class act and a gentleman through and through, it's hard to think of a better ambassador than Lee Haney. Add to that his record tying 8 Olympia titles, and it's no wonder Lee is often considered the greatest of all time. He really was something special. So, there you have it, folks. That's my top 5 most groundbreaking old school physiques. But before we conclude, I also just got to give a shout out to Frank Zane, probably the most glaring omission from this list. Zane clearly had a huge impact on bodybuilding, proving that you didn't need to be super massive in order to win on the biggest stage of them all, that you could do so on the basis of ripped aesthetics and pristine presentation alone. But I wanted to limit it to 5 to preserve the symmetry between this video and the last one, so consider Zane an honorable mention. Alright, and that's going to do it. Hopefully you enjoyed. If so, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. And until next time, this has been the Tominator signing off, and I'll be back.